This is what we've been waiting for. Okay, everybody, we're here today to talk about the Excidium strat. Now, before we talk about the Excidium strat, we should probably talk about what the meta was like around the time it was created in GC2. So in the Grand Colosseum 2, we had a little bit more understanding of what we were to expect, because Grand Colosseum 1, it was chaos. The matchings were chaos, and even how to win the Grand Colosseum, people were like, what do we exactly do? How do we exactly win? And once we figured out it was all about how much life force you can possibly gain, it became very apparent that depending on your time slot would be dependent on what your matchups were and how you could efficiently gain the most amount of life force. And this was a problem for a lot of guilds because they hadn't built for this, even though they were typically strong. A great example of that was IDemiiK cult at the time. An incredibly strong guild, but hadn't quite worked out the finesse of how to maximize how much life force you could gain. Whereas guilds like Eden and TG worked a lot to get the most out of their things. Eden especially were already building to kind of farm their opponents for as much life force they can get, whether it was for Grand Colosseum or whether it was for just every day anyway, considering they were so vastly above everyone else, kind of like cybercrime is now. So to do this, guilds adopted certain farm strategies which were particularly risky. They would do things like take off their armor so that the enemy would hit them for more, therefore gaining more life force. They would invest only in, let's say, defense down books and attack up instruments. Therefore, when they hit the enemy team, they would hit them a lot harder and gain the most amount of life force. But in return, they wouldn't invest in any defense up instruments. So their defenses would not only be armorless, but they would also be, their defense would be weaker, all for allowing their weaker opponents to just hit them as hard as they can, for as much as they can, knowing that they could probably out-heal it or just gain it back through ships or whatnot. And another thing which was used at the time, which now, for obvious reasons, was forcibly allowing your opponents to take Shinma. So not invest in any stock into it, and just go in, letting them get the Shinma, because if the enemy has the Shinma, that means that they can hit harder. Now, some guilds will still forego Shinma because it just doesn't favor them. For example, if they are 5 magic attackers and it's a hammer Shinma, they're probably not going to win it if the other team has crushers or something like that. So guilds will still forego getting a Shinma, but work around it with like a superior composition or more strength built around that. And but now, like, giving your opponent Shinma not only pretty much gives them a ship, which is points that you lose, because a lot of guilds, even weaker guilds, have enough power that with a Shinma can take down a ship. But also, if your guild has a Shinma, depending on whether it's spears or guns or something like that, it empowers that weapon significantly. And with the strength of some of the weapons that are available, having that Shinma on your side allows you just to do like huge overkill damage, which you'll get in life force. So giving your opponent the Shinma is not really seen anymore, which is why the Excidium strat that we're going to see here is a lot harder to get. So when you're trying to play an Excidium strat yourself, you're going to have to spec heavily into the Shinma that you want to get, so that you can pull it off effectively, because your opponents aren't going to give it to you anymore. Whereas in this Flame Excidium match, they will be giving it to him. So we'll get started on the match here. And you're going to see different nightmares as well. This was a lot earlier, so they didn't have access to Dryas or Uno or even UFO. And Flame starts off with an Eris, which I think definitely fell out of favor pretty much straight after GC2, if anything. And Excidium have gone for the Karkanos, which was the unpaid nightmare version of Library Wisp. So Excidium are going for high defensive straight away. Flame are going for reduced SP, which doesn't really gain anything much from them, but they probably not aiming to attack or down Excidium straight away. They want Excidium to kind of build up some points here. But what's very important about this match in particular was that the first Shinma of this Grand Colosseum was the instrument Shinma. And that's a very integral part to the Excidium strat. Excidium have now gone for a Cecilia, so they're further buffing themselves. Around this time, like, going for buffing Shinmas in the beginning was pretty common. It would usually be a double buff Shinma, so like a Shinma like Cecilia and Library Wisp, and maybe even another one was quite common. And I think you'll find after this Eris, Flame are probably themselves going to use a buff Nightmare. But that was dropped later on as well, just because the amount that you get from the buff, although it's a decent amount, but it's not more than you could get effectively from let's say an Urugalu, and have your minstrels naturally buff you, as well as gaining the effects for your clerics or your vanguards and your rear guards from the elemental buff. So there's Excidium's own Eris now, and theirs was an SR. So Excidium at the time, Flame was probably the second strongest guild in their time slot, underneath OnlyFans at the time, and probably definitely like a top 10 contender for sure. Like, Flame were very strong. Excidium were a sister guild of Eden, so even though they were a part of Eden, they had nowhere near as much power. They were actually considerably weak for the time slot. Not like being underneath even Grimlord, Mirage, and Jurasin's Logos. So there. So now we've got the instrument Shinma up. And Excidium have Eris, which may prove useful to being able to pump out more rotations before having to go into SP. But Flame are going to give it to them anyway, because Flame are going, oh, we want Excidium to take it because we're going to let them buff up their attack. We're going to let them do damage to us so they can farm as much as they can. So look, you can see Flame aren't even close there. Excidium have nearly got it. So with this, Excidium probably still might not be strong enough to even kill Flame with the Shinma. But what they're going to do here now is they, with increased like instruments, they can now super buff up at least the attack of their vanguards. And because of Flame's strategy similar to other top guild strategy, they don't pack attack down books really, because they want their enemies to have high attack, and so though they might have some, they won't have as many, and so Excidium are gonna have a chance here to even buff up their vanguards even more. Now, what they're going to do after their vanguards have the most amount of buffs they could get, they're not going to down Flame. Like I said, they probably don't have enough power to do it anyway at this rate. Whereas guilds today would probably be able to take a ship regardless. what they're going to do is swap their vanguards to the back row, thus keeping all of the buffs they get, even if they are they can't be debuffed from the back row. So, and then that's going to come into effect later on in the match. So as you can see, it's quite even here, which is kind of what Flame were hoping to do and hoping to get. So Excidium have like a lot of points here that Flame are hoping to farm back in a bit. And there you go. So now they've swapped in their rear guards there at the bottom two. The top three are still up, but they'll be swapping out soon as well, before their vanguards start losing too many attack buffs now that the Shinma's gone. So now Flame are at a conundrum, and this was kind of a cheesy point of the strategy, is now Excidium are no longer gaining any life force. They're gaining small amounts from their vanguards attacking from the back, but it's minimal. And their rear guards are weak. They've got clerics up front. They're not being able to heal. And Flame doesn't really have much of a choice but to ship them. Because not attacking at all means that Flame doesn't get anything either. So, like, if Flame do nothing, they get no points. If Flame attack, they'll at least take those points that they've got. But Excidium have no way of gaining more life force. Flame, this was the first time that this strat obviously came about, and Flame probably don't really know what to do here, because they had plans for vanguards being there, for the guild being there regardless. Just trying to keep them alive and let them farm points, and now there's nothing but to do, and a call's probably been made to just down them repeatedly. If they're not going to bring their vanguards to the front and attack, they've got no choice but to take it from the ships. And to make it worse, during this Grand Colo, there wasn't the extra ship point bonus, so they didn't get any extra GC points for taking ships. They just got what they could from ships. So we're going to skip a little bit more forward because it's basically going to be repeatedly shipping. It's not a very effective way to gain life force for your guild using this Excidium strat. Excidium had done this because they're like, this is the only way we can gain any amount of points this Grand Colo. Regardless, but when executed right, the Excidium strat can net you a lot more points and maybe even take a win if done correctly these days with the weapons available, with the nightmares available. So after this ship, we've got a demon summon coming. Yeah, exactly. So, whilst in the back row, Excidium aren't doing nothing. They're, oh, they've already done the swap. Hold on. So, it's a second instrument Shimmer as well, so... So they swapped in just before the, yeah, here, just as the demon approaches. There you go. So the demon approaches has come in now, and they've brought their vanguards in. Their vanguards are now buffed up, and the back row are going to be using their instruments. They're not going to be using the books because they're going to want to win this Shinma. Flame are. They take down Excidium here, but that just means Excidium get that extra like half rotation advantage to try and get this Shinma themselves. So there. Excidium, it's very close here, but Flame might even take them down again here. They can't afford to not hit, else they're going to lose out on rotation as well. So Flame are just pushing. Excidium, they're at 35k at this point in the match. Spec'd into combo. I'm not sure Halua Head was out during GC2. Can't be sure. I don't know. Kayane's there, so yeah, possibly. But there, down again. But you can see Excidium are at 65 versus like 57. So Excidium are going to come back and they're going to get another chance on this rotation here. No, Halua Head didn't come out in GC before GC1. That was the Nier Automata event. Nier Replicant was when the Halua Head came out. At this point, Replicant is out because you can see Kayane's there. And Excidium, they're 74 to 68. They're about to take this Shinma. They've got the buffs on their Vanguard, and they're going to be able to buff again for the reasons in the original Shinma that Flame aren't spec'd heavily into attack down anyway. And now they Flame die immediately to the Shinma. So this was likely to be a call from Flame themselves, knowing that they're going to lose. They probably stopped healing a little bit before, so that Excidium couldn't maximize the instrument Shinma, but they lost a ship here. So Excidium from 35,000 to Flame's like 1-2 million is going to be a huge chunk of life force here, and it's going to swing them back quite a bit. And if they manage to continue, which they probably won't because they don't have the Shinma anymore, Flame are just that much stronger. Excidium now 368,000, which was like a fair amount at the time. If you can see Flame only have like 1 million here, it would be slightly different these days because of the amount of power. Yeah. But now it's down to the final nightmares. So Excidium being in the defense, being at a disadvantage, still have that justice play, but they might be able to take another ship. I can't remember the final outcome of the match, but the fact that Excidium took a ship from Flame was very good for them. That's what they wanted. They knew they couldn't beat Flame, so they had to exercise a strategy where they could gain as much points as they could from this match to give them a better standing than any other team that would go against Flame, and therefore any team equal to Excidium would come out slightly more, which was, all for those few extra places in Grand Colo. Maybe changing from a top 50 slot to a top 30 slot increases those rewards, regardless of how cucked Flame may have been here. But Excidium is putting the power to use. They're still hovering around that 300,000 mark. And there it is. So at the time, the instead of Justice, they had Ogre. Ogre came out in time, and they're going to be able to use that. Ogre was the first instance of a Defiant Aurora 3. I'm not sure whether that one's Eld or not. I don't know if Excidium had the materials to do it, but they probably did. I can't remember what an SR Ogre looks like. But it's good timing for the Ogre as well. I mean, there's 2 minutes left to play. Flame sweating now, not wanting to lose to Ogre. Still, at that time and to this day, Ogre, Mao, any Defiant Roar is a very tricky thing to counter against. So Flame have gone for the Shadow Lord here to just push the amount of damage they can do out. Shadow Lord probably being a very strong Nightmare at the time, or one of the strongest at the time. Downing the opponent is the only way to do it, but Excidium, now with their buffs from being in the back row all game and not getting debuffed, have the chance to use this Ogre against them. As you can see, Flame are going down here, like their Vanguards are going down. It's a real struggle, and then they do. So Excidium take a second ship from Flame, so 2 ships from Flame was pretty much more than they could ask for. 45 seconds left, so there won't be enough time for Excidium to take another ship here. This is going to be the last ship that of the game, but it's going to put them at like 500,000 maybe. And Flame go down to probably like 1.3 million. So Excidium, I'm trying to remember the amount of points at the time. So yeah, so 600,000, Flame about 1.3 million there. 14 seconds left, no other ships to take. And Excidium get a chunk of change from that encounter, more than what any other guild around their power level could get from the exercise of putting their rear guards to the back. And there have been many different variations of that strategy that's been used. People who maybe have a fleeting knowledge of the strategy has tried it. There's a lot of guilds that have gone out and tried the strategy, and it's just not worked. It happened against me and Indecisive. A guild tried to do it, but they didn't manage to down us even with the Ogre. That's how much the power difference was. So they didn't manage to get the ship. But there are counters to this strategy, and again, it's very difficult to execute now. But the variations that have come from this, yeah, the strat itself is pretty in depth, and there are things that probably I don't know, but you can get the base understanding of this. But I think the variants of this strategy that have, or the variants that have evolved from this strategy, are a lot better to use in I'd say modern SINoALICE. Like the SINoALICE of now works a bit more consistently, doesn't require things like instrument Shinma to be given to you or to have an instrument Shinma at all. But it's all about balancing about how much life force can be earned as well. So you want to be able to you want the enemy team to be able to farm life force from you, which means you need to be able to put out enough damage, as well as so that you can take more points back from them, and also it doesn't completely cuck the enemy team, because to an extent, when you're in the back row not attacking for like 10 minutes of the fight, you're effectively sandbagging for 10 minutes of the fight. Like I've mentioned it before. There's no like really two ways about it, and a lot of people are saying, well, it's the only way you can get things. But like when you're actively stopping how much life force can be gained in a match, like there's no two ways about it. But yeah, that's the Excidium strat at a glance, at a somewhat form of a breakdown. And for, I hope anyone that watches this has a better understanding of it and can use things that have been developed here to create strategies of their own, because it's not going to be the same for every guild. And in future videos, hopefully we'll talk about some of the variants that have come from this strategy. I want to thank everyone for tuning into this. Say hi to YouTube. And I hope to see you again. And that that was hopefully for YouTube.